Our energy needs are shooting up every day. Heat, electricity, and water are all things we can't do without at home. But producing these utilities emits carbon dioxide and contributes greatly to each of our carbon footprints over our lifetime. What can we do to reduce our emissions and make our homes more sustainable? That's what we'll explore today. Hello and welcome to Eco India. I'm Sanuta Raghu, coming to you from Mumbai. Over the last century, rapid industrialization and urbanization made sure our homes became less and less in sync with the natural environment we live in. Many of our building practices used over time harmed nature instead of helping it thrive. An architect we met in Delhi is paving the path to make our homes eco-friendly again.
The New Delhi skyline is a mixture of modern skyscrapers and energy-intensive, poorly designed constructions. Carbon emissions from buildings are often neglected from the climate debate. But in India, buildings alone are said to contribute to 40% of energy-related carbon emissions. Architect Nilanjan Bhoval has been designing sustainable, functional buildings for over 20 years. He says their need is now urgent. But there are still a lot of misconceptions about what green building design really means.
The biggest myth is that people believe that a green home is one that has a lot of green plants. You put in a lot of plants, lawn and grass, it becomes green. Which is not so. In a green building, it's actually green because it respects nature and it kind of uses the replenishable resources. And reduces wastage, reduces consumption, and we recycle a lot of materials.
One of Bhoval's designs in New Delhi is famous for being India's first 5-star rated green home called Green 1. The home has been certified by research and policy organization, the Energy and Resources Institute. Large windows provide lots of natural light, while double glazing, a relatively new feature in India, insulates the building, keeping it cool in India's hot summers. Bhoval worked with Green 1 owner Prashanto Roy Kumar to make his home sustainable. One important factor for going green was sourcing local materials.
Next door, there are other identical plots where people have rebuilt houses which look the same, which are the same size. And those houses have cost more. They've cost much more than my house. Why? Because they have spent on a lot more expensive things. They have, for example, brought in Italian marble, or they've maybe gold fittings, or, very, very expensive finishing. So actually, it turned out that my house cost less than those houses.
The house also generates renewable energy and harvests rainwater. Today, it is able to capture 75% of its water demand and can also save up to 40% of its power. Bhoval explains that these features pay off over time.
I think it is still worth it if you spend 10% more or 15% more, and after 5 years it pays for itself, and then after that it runs virtually free of cost, and you are giving back to the future generations, you're giving back to the environment. We are now coming into the concept of zero carbon, net zero buildings, which are going to give back more than they consume. I think that's the need of the hour right now.
At the moment, India has around 1.4 million modern homes that are built with a green concept, which constitutes less than 5% of all residential properties. The Indian Green Building Council hopes to take this number up to 10% by 2022, and some states have already begun giving more incentives to green certified constructions. However, this statistic excludes the countless temporary homes and those built by hand in rural India, traditional homes that are often green in their own right.
We are always inspired by our old structures. History has to be studied, because historically what people have built naturally, it is known that they are the best structures. And what we do is we contemporize it a bit so that we can use the same materials but in a more contemporary way using modern technology, so that it is relevant, so that it's easier to maintain today.
Bhoval renovated his own house in the year 2000. He was inspired by the traditional methods of reusing and building based on the environment.
I used all the broken tiles that came out from the toilets. So all that were broken and used in the form of a pattern. And since a lot of them were light colored tiles, it reflects a lot of heat as well.
More people can now afford the initial investment, and more Indians are getting conscious about the impact of their choices on the environment.
I strongly feel that sustainability has to start from home, and you have to adopt a sustainable lifestyle before you want a sustainable and green building. So I think the consciousness has come in, and pandemic or not, this will really pick up. But I am sure post this COVID situation, we have been receiving a lot of calls from clients saying that let us simplify our homes, let us keep more open areas, let's reduce the built up area, let's go in for more green measures, let's go in plant more trees, because they help in taking care of pollution as well.
As the link between personal choice and the environment becomes clearer, architects like Bhoval hope this need will only continue to grow.
Now, like we just saw, using solar panels is one way to make our buildings green. But installation can be costly, and panels are not always efficient in converting sunlight into electricity. What if we could use an entire building facade to generate electricity? A university in Germany is looking at ways to do just that.
Photosynthesis on our planet dates back almost 3 billion years. Today's plants harvest the energy of the sun with the help of a green pigment called chlorophyll in their leaves. It absorbs sunlight to produce chemical energy, which enables the plant to grow. This energy is truly green. At the University of Kassel, scientists are trying to use the same principle to generate energy. A team of architects, artists, scientists, and designers are working on a building material that will transform sunlight into electricity, like a solar cell. The basis of the system is just ordinary concrete. The researchers mix it with graphite to make it electrically conductive. When it has hardened, it can take on various electronic functions, acting as a light switch, for instance. Heike Klusmann is an artist. Thorsten Kloster, an architect. They came up with the idea of using conductive concrete to generate solar power.
What you see here looks like ordinary concrete, but what's special about it is that it's sensitive to the touch, as you can see. And that's because we've made this concrete capable of conducting electricity. And this conductive concrete is the basis for our solar concrete.
To give the concrete the desired characteristics, the scientists spray on various layers of colored liquid. The result is a dye-sensitized solar cell that produces electricity through a kind of artificial photosynthesis. The order in which the wafer-thin layers of color are applied is crucial.
If you combine the layers correctly, you end up with something that functions like a photovoltaic cell. One layer contains dye pigments. When sunlight strikes them, electrons are released and current starts to flow.
To improve their dye-sensitized solar cells, the researchers conducted long-term measurements in the lab. A single solar cell provides just a few volts of electricity. If you cover it with your hand, the current falls sharply and rises again when light hits the solar cell. The cell's current efficiency is 5%. That's twice as high as it was when the research started.
Solar concrete, or discrete, is so interesting because it's really easy to produce, it's environmentally friendly, and can be used on large surfaces. Maybe one day in the future, all the smooth, flat surfaces in the city could be used to produce electricity.
The more cells that are affixed onto a building's wall, the more electricity it can produce. To do this, the individual cells need to be interconnected. Under ideal conditions, a surface area of 1 square meter could generate 20 watts of power. Now the researchers want to take the concept to another level. They have developed prototypes of facade robots that could, in the future, scale the outside of buildings and print solar cells on them. In 5 years, they hope to roll out their solar concrete, so it can be used to construct new buildings and upgrade existing facades.
That's inspiring, isn't it? Now, like me, I'm sure many of you have wondered, what can we do about all the plastic we use and dispose on a daily basis? We've all seen the headlines that tell us how 8 million tons of plastic makes it into the ocean every year. But is there an eco-friendly alternative to plastic available to us? A scientist in Indonesia may have the answer to our question.
Plastic waste as far as the eye can see. Here, north of Jakarta, a grim normality. In Indonesia, as much as 3 million tons end up in the ocean every year. And that's why Nori Mulyono wants change. Her aim, keeping the seas clean. Her solution, seaweed. The green weeds not only filter the water of unwanted toxins and encourage biodiversity. For Nori Mulyono, they also are an alternative to plastic packaging.
How can we solve it if we do not have something to replace this plastic? Because of course we cannot go back to our ancient to live without plastic as a packaging. So we have to think about this environmentally friendly packaging.
Like the one she has come up with. The sheet here is a result of 10 years of research as a food scientist, financed by institutions and grants. It's her pride and joy. She uses a red algae that has a special polymer that makes products made from it very pliable. The foil can be kept for 2 years, and it even dissolves in hot water. Practical for popular products like instant coffee. Over 200 companies worldwide are testing the foil, and though it's edible, you don't have to eat it.
People can dispose it in everywhere on the garden, and it will be fertilizer for plants, or just throw it on the wastewater, and it will not clog your wastewater stream.
Nori Mulyono's advantage? There are plenty of seaweed farms in her country. Indonesia is one of the world's biggest producers of seaweed. Around 200,000 farmers work under and above water, like Abdul Syukur. He cultivates 300 lines in Panggang. One of his clients is Nori Mulyono. In the past, he was financially unstable. But now, his take-home pay is much more secure.
Seaweed farming is full of promise. We hope it will enable us to pay for the best possible education for our children. And it's much more profitable than working as a fisherman or specializing in aquaculture. We hope that seaweed will always flourish here and that we can maintain its quality.
The seaweed business here is often a family affair. The women tie the seedlings to the lines and take care of the finances. Nori Mulyono teaches them the business side of things to gain independence. Meanwhile, the men are responsible for the cultivation and harvest. Around 2,000 families supply for Mulyono's bioplastic. She regularly meets with the heads of communities to exchange the latest production numbers. To pay fairer wages, she cuts out middlemen.
The most important things that drive me to passionate in this is about coastal communities. They are living in rural area, so they have no access to fulfill their basic need. So some of them also have been the victim of human trafficking. So I think it's very, very important and urgent to help them to improve their livelihood.
When the pandemic has eased, Nori Molyono will need more suppliers to scale up production. Farmers like Abdul Shakur. It's primarily big food chains and cosmetics distributors who want to see their products wrapped up in seaweed. Demand for plastic-free packaging is growing, and she's using a raw material with massive future potential.
It's not just the energy and materials we use inside our homes that have an impact on the environment. What we use to build our houses and apartments with takes a toll too. But there are alternatives that are more environmentally friendly than others. We visited a home in England made entirely out of a material that many of us commonly associate with wine.
You can use cork for wine bottles or to build an entire house. This one in Eton, England is actually made completely of cork, and it's entirely sustainable.
I've always been slightly dissatisfied with things that we typically build with in architecture, especially in housing. So, you know, concrete blocks, cement-based mortar, plastic foam insulation. It's a whole collection of things which end up being quite sort of negative impact on resource systems.
Matthew Howland and his team experimented for almost 10 years, cutting and interlocking cork blocks until they found the best structural solution. The 1,268 blocks are slotted together without mortar. Gravity alone holds them together, and no additional insulation is needed. It does have a smell all of its own, a bit like inside a cigar box. 44 square meters of comfort and security. Modern and archaic at once, rather like in an ancient Mayan temple. Cork has long been used on building facades. This holiday home was built in 2007 in northern Portugal, the habitat of the cork oak. Time has left its mark on this house. Cork's in tune with the environment, moves and changes colour. That's exactly what Vasco Magalhães likes about it.
As it rained and it's wet here, this one is behaving just as we expected. So this chocolate brown color, it's the color, the reaction to the wetness of the atmosphere. It's very sensual material. It follows the seasons and it changes through the year.
A tribute to Portugal's national pride. It has the world's largest cork oak forest. It's a paradise of biodiversity and a boon to the climate.
Portugal is very privileged because cork has a unique ecosystem. For each ton of cork, we retain 73 tons of CO2. And it's a tree species that we don't cut, we just peel the bark of the tree.
The trees can be up to 200 years old. The cork can be harvested every 9 years when the bark grows thick enough to be carefully cut. As bottle corks are increasingly replaced by metal and plastic stoppers, the oak is in decline. So the rediscovery of cork as a building material is welcome. Its look is also in line with current trends.
You're not going to put something on the outside of your house if you don't like it. So people first have a visual, an aesthetic satisfaction with the product. It is at the same time a rustic, contemporary visual.
Now hundreds of constructions using cork have been built. Private homes, doctors' practices, schools. But there has never been a building made exclusively of cork like the house in Eton. Matthew Howland is pleased with the result. And given the almost zero carbon footprint, he'll certainly be able to sleep with a clear conscience.
One of the go-to options across the world today when it comes to building fast and affordable homes is shipping containers. They've been used to build hostels, hotels, restaurants, and even makeshift schools. But skeptics have sometimes questioned their feasibility as a sustainable building block. A designer duo in Pune seems to be finding solutions to tackle this skepticism by providing a more eco-friendly alternative.
Not long ago, this daycare center urgently needed to extend the building and decided to try something different, opting to use discarded shipping containers. Now these steel boxes house a playroom for children, where they learn math, geography, and incidentally, also about how to live sustainably.
I was searching for something that can be quickly constructed. And if at all in future we want to change something, then that option is there because it's a mobile kind of construction.
Sonali Patkar and Dhara Kabaria run the company that provided the containers. They founded Studio Alternatives in 2016 to design and build homes, workspaces, and just about anything that can be contained within 4 walls, all using discarded shipping containers.
The motivation that we have to work behind this is also a very big environmental factor, where we feel that nothing should go waste and we should be able to work with all kinds of material that we have around us. So as humans, we've created so many complex materials and that we ourselves don't know what to do with, and it is just ending in landfill.
Since 1956, shipping containers have been the standard way of forwarding freight. Built with corrosion-resistant steel, they are used for transporting cargo for about 12 years. After this period, they sit in junkyards waiting to be melted. But melting shipping containers uses 8,000 kilowatt-hour of energy. Repurposing them into buildings requires just 5% of that power. Following their guiding principle of creative reuse, the partners were keen to show what's possible. So they designed and built a home for Dara and her family, made entirely out of scrap and 3 discarded shipping containers.
So this entrance door is made with old windows and again glass which are reclaimed. And once you enter, this house is made with 3 20-feet containers converted into 2-bedroom house. This is a kitchen sink cum wash basin. So with the restrictions of keeping the plumbing in one container, we try to come up with the wash basin cum sink made out of old barrel, and water can be used either of the side.
The Blue House, built at a cost of 17 lakh rupees or 22,000 euros, has served as a show home to convince new buyers to opt for an attractive yet cost-effective and environmental-free living space. A shipping container can be up to 12 meters long. It needs to be treated thoroughly to eliminate exposure to toxic chemicals and also to prevent rust. Studio Alternatives procures its containers locally from a port in Mumbai, each one costing up to 100,000 rupees or 1,300 euros. A typical container home takes about 3 to 6 months to make and can subsequently be transported to any part of the world. It has a much lower carbon footprint than homes built with cement, for example, which is one of the biggest producers of carbon dioxide worldwide. But as yet, these homes made from discarded containers are still something of an experiment rather than a go-to housing solution.
This becomes mainstream in terms of acceptance, that people think that reuse is not because I can't afford it, but because it's making aesthetic and environmental sense. So till we achieve that, probably, we are still in that zone where we are trying it out.
The designers have built 16 container homes so far and saved close to 120 tons of steel. And perhaps even more importantly, they are spreading the word of reutilization and eco-friendly constructions amongst the youngest in society.
I hope today's episode has given you a sense of how people around the world are making sustainable choices when it comes to their living spaces. And I hope you had many takeaways from it. We'll see you again next week. Until then, stay safe, take good care of your loved ones and yourselves. Goodbye.
Contoh sama orang luar.